Fortunately, with my Excel spreadsheet, I just use simple bar graphs and charts to look at changes. So I was able to chart what percentage of my students started green and stayed green, what started yellow and stayed yellow, and started red and stayed red. But then I also could chart the changes, so who went up and who went down, with just simple pie charts and bar graphs using the spreadsheet that I had in Excel. My original question, the big goal was, are my students on track or off track? And then the specific question is, which students were on track or off track and why? And so using the early academic warning system, I was able to, at various snapshots, determine who was on track and off track. And then by collecting data that wasn't there, but pulling all the pieces together throughout the semester to look at patterns, I could tell those students that were off track, they started off the wrong foot, their first few quizzes. Early in the semester, it gave me feedback about their progress and gave the students their own feedback about, if I'm not passing this class, either what they needed to do to improve their score or whether or not the class was a good fit for them. And then I also learned most of my students who were in that middle group, so they started out the semester, they were struggling somewhat, but they really wanted to improve. They actually were able to move from the yellow sort of warning symbol into the green, passing, doing well in the class. And there were a few students that started out really well, and I think that was because of their teams. So the data that I got was that their teams were helping sort of carry them and inflate their grades, and then when it came to the actual exams, they didn't do as well as they had hoped. And so I'd learned after the first exam to inform students that just because you're in this green passing, you're also individually accountable when it comes to the exams, and so don't be misled by working with your teams, that you also need to know all of the material that they were doing in their group work and be able to apply it in an exam situation. And so that was an surprising finding for me that I hadn't thought about. I was just concerned about students who were not passing or barely passing and improving them, but I hadn't thought about the students that were doing well and might slip later in the semester and how to address that. And so being able to look at the early academic warning system and how students were changing across the course of the semester, that surprising finding helped me address those students who started out well but then slipped later in the semester. This was my first time teaching introductory statistics to 100 undergraduate students in a team-based learning format. It gave me feedback about what I needed to change as an instructor. And so if I was setting the bar too high for all of the students, so what percentage of my students were failing the class, what percentage were in the middle, what percentage were passing, and so how did I need to adjust my instruction to make sure that the students had the opportunity to be successful, right? They still had individual motivation and their own interests in the class, but these were students taking the class as a requirement, not necessarily really thrilled about statistics as a discipline or as a course. And so how did I need to model as a coach in the classroom, the way I wanted them to think, right? And so when we got to the exam and they had to model that thinking in an exam format, some of them struggled. And so I took that as a reflection on my own ability to model that for them. So I actually changed my instruction based on the quizzes and their first warning system feedback and that first exam to do more application, less lecturing. And also, I changed, based on the quizzes and the feedback, I gave them reading sheets to guide some of their reading. So they also needed some scaffolding about how to read a statistics textbook to take these reading quizzes. And so a lot of what I need to do is give them the structures and the support to be successful. And then they were able to better do it in the second, starting after the first third of the class. So I had my own it was definitely feedback to me about how well I was doing as an instructor, not just how well the students were progressing in the class.